Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast. Hopefully you're coming back for more. This is Dion Mitchell along with Mehul and Anjaria, and we're excited to bring you yet another fascinating guest today.
Yeah, Dion, you might say that our guest today is the very essence of the phrase crime redefined. We're excited to talk to Michelle Freed. She specializes in hypnosis and remote viewing.
What does that have to do with crime, you say? Plenty, as you will hear. Michelle works with law enforcement on criminal investigations as well as missing person cases and has had some amazing success, Mehul.
Michelle Freed is board certified by the National Guild of Hypnotists and is a graduate of the Alternative Practitioner Academy in Arlington Heights, Illinois, not too far from where I grew up. She's also completed advanced training programs at the International School of Clairvoyance, where she learned to integrate her intuitive gifts with her hypnosis skills.
Michelle has also appeared on an episode of one of my favorite shows, Ancient Aliens. She teaches courses on remote viewing, a technique which she will break down for us. I first learned about Michelle while listening to a Coast to Coast program where, as I came into the program, she was saying something about remote viewing and missing persons, so she had my attention.
Well, that was a good call. So let's all open up our minds a little bit and, in fact, find out how our minds work with Michelle Freed.
Welcome to Crime Redefined.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
You know, I got to be honest, full disclosure here, ever since I heard your interview on Coast to Coast, I've been wanting to talk to you, so we really appreciate your time today. I thought that was such a fascinating interview.
Oh, cool. It's good to know that somebody heard it.
Well, Michelle, let's start with the name of your website, the Butterfly Effect Center. You know, butterfly effect is a term I think we hear a lot in popular culture, and I have a feeling many people are unclear what that is. So to start, can you define that and then tell us how that relates to your work?
Well, I started out being trained in hypnotherapy, hypnosis, and using it as a therapy. And it just came to me, this idea. I think I was going through something where I felt like, I was married and I had 3 kids I was raising, and I kind of lost myself in there. And I felt like I was in a cocoon and really wanted to emerge. And I think a friend of mine just said, give it time. It will come. You'll emerge like a butterfly. And so that was my symbol to keep going, because there were a lot of, hard times during that period. And that was a really good symbol for me. And I just kept my eye on the target, and it just kind of led me down this path. And I'm still going down the path. But that's what prompted the Butterfly Effect Center.
Oh, interesting.
Can you talk about the right brain and the left brain and how that applies to your work?
Right. So that was how I kind of matched what we're going to talk about in a little bit with remote viewing. So my studies in hypnosis, where I learned about how our brain works, really is applied to anything where we're operating from the subconscious. So you have your left brain, which is responsible for drawing conclusions, making assumptions. It's very analytical, judgmental. Any kind of critical thinking happens in the left brain. And the right brain operates from a perspective of it doesn't really know words. It has permanent memory, and it operates from a place of emotion. So any word you think of or say is attached to an emotion. And then they talk about an unconscious, which is all the automatic parts of our body that operate on its own that we don't think about, blinking, breathing, things like that. And so however you're feeling will affect how your body reacts. And through all the research that I've done, I found that this all makes sense when you're, doing things in your consciousness and your subconscious, and it makes sense. And a lot of people will come up and they'll say things like, well, if you're psychic, why aren't you making millions of dollars? And this is the answer. It's because of our left brain. That's the part that makes us human, and it's responsible for um, finding patterns for survival. I mean, we used it when we were primitive, um, and we would find, different patterns in the world and then make a judgment call on should we go get that animal or, whatever. So until we find a way to really work with the left brain and the right brain together, we're not always going to be 100%. But the more people that work and exercise this kind of aspect of our mind, I think the better and better and better we'll get. Just like anything else, we just kind of blow through the ceiling and make a lot of progress.
Is there a dominant side?
I think that in terms of a dominant side, I don't see it as a dominant. So I guess I would say left brain because we rely on it. But I think, I created a meditation or a guided meditation where we play around with the left brain and right brain, meaning we set up an imagery of a gauge. And when we want to pay our bills or anything logical, you use a dial and you turn up the left brain and you turn down the right brain, which is really good for people with ADD. And then when you want to be creative and you want to paint or write a book or whatever, just use that dial and turn up the right brain and down the left brain. So I think that, people that are kind of running on automatic or not thinking about these things probably are operating from either or. But people that are more aware of what's going on they can adjust it and use it to their advantage with whatever they want to do in the day.
Michelle, that's kind of a good segue or a comparison to forensic science, because in my field, we're starting to become more aware of cognitive bias. So as scientists, we say, well, we're not biased, but we're not aware of how our mind actually processes information. And there's certain things we can't control. And that just seems like a great parallel to your work. So can you talk a little bit more about the importance of stripping back biases and thought patterns in order to get the information you're looking for when you're doing, hypnosis or remote viewing?
Right. So in remote viewing, it's part of the process of our training. And it is complicated to kind of go into that, but I think I can give you a little bit of information.
Okay, great.
Probably the first layer of it. So so an example that I use all the time is, say, we're in the mindset that when we remote view, our intention is to describe things and not name them. And the reason for that is basically so we don't have a bias to something and that we don't build a story around the wrong information. So if I said I'm perceiving something that's red, shiny, and round, so my left brain's going to kick in and it's going to go red, shiny, round, apple. It's an apple. And if I'm looking for a missing person and I start describing an apple, which leads to a banana, which leads to a fruit basket, unless that missing person is with a fruit basket, that's not going to be helpful, because the truth is that could have been a truck and I totally missed the mark on it. So we want to stick to just describing things and not getting hung up on the names of things, because the way we perceive information is really subjective and based on our life conditions.
This is probably a good time to have you define a few terms for our listeners. Let's start with hypnosis. How do you explain hypnosis to people who think it's like someone swinging a watch in front of a client to make them do weird things, or like on a stage
Right.
for a performance or something.
Yeah, those a lot of the what was the movie or yeah, it was a movie, The Office, right? No, Office Space. I
Oh
think
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So no, nobody can get stuck in hypnosis. Hollywood is not doing us a really good favor.
It's not
Um,
helping.
so hypnosis is really a natural state of being. It's a natural function of humans. Anytime you are focused on something, you are being hypnotized. That's the quick and dirty explanation. So if you're watching TV and you're really focused on, and if you guys can recall a time when you didn't realize somebody left the room or somebody came in the room or something. I know I have 3 kids and I'll be like, "Oh, did so and so leave the room?" It's
Right.
because
Yeah, definitely happens.
yeah, I was totally hypnotized by the TV. And one step further is the TV understands this and they talk to your subconscious and they make suggestions because they know that what our primitive needs are, is feeling a belonging, and we want to procreate and security. And so commercials are talking to those 3 things. They build up that fear, the fear of not belonging, the fear of not having security, and saying, "Hey, buy my product and we'll take care of that." They do that a lot in the pharmaceuticals. So all that is hypnosis. But what if you can use hypnosis in a way to help people, where people want to change habits, change bad habits, change from being afraid of something, quit smoking, just making improvements in their life. That we could use that in a beneficial way and help people by kind of opening up that moment when they have focused attention and insert some really good healthy suggestions that will change their life.
Well, that's a great explanation. I think that really clears it up. And I want to move on to remote viewing. And I got to tell you, Michelle, I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding exactly what that is and picturing, what a session is like. So can you break down remote viewing to kind of its essence and, how it's performed?
Yes. So remote viewing, there are a lot of different definitions of it in the world. Like a lot of people, what I kind of say is like a freestyle, where they'll just kind of close their eyes and tune in to a location or something, and then they'll describe it. It's kind of like a psychic reading sort of thing. The kind of remote viewing that I work with is called controlled remote viewing. And it's set up in a very scientific way, meaning that we have some perimeters around it. We follow a protocol and we are also blind to the target. And that means that pretty much never do we know what the target is. So because what will happen is you'll have a bias to it and you want to be clean for your session. And then again, as I said before, we describe things that we perceive. So it's a lot about what it looks like is you would see somebody sitting at a desk maybe with paper and a pen, and they're writing things down, and they flow through different phases that are taught, which I teach in my class. And they flow through these phases, which are designed to prompt you to get more information and more details about whatever the tasking would be, like the secret question. So if you're doing a missing person, the tasking could be describe the current condition of so-and-so. And you don't know the so-and-so. So you just kind of follow the procedure, follow what you're taught. It kind of is like a martial art because we do need to practice a lot. And you just, the session when you're done with it kind of looks like raw data or data, depending on how you say that, data or data. um, and but it just looks like a mess. But you have to have people that know how to read these sessions. We also provide a summary as well. And so through that, you just extract a lot of information that can help. There's also different tools we use within remote viewing that are especially helpful for crimes. One is we do mapping and we do dowsing. And we also have a special, like, adjunct version where we do something called MedApps, which helps us get into the minds and the physical details of a person. So does that, I don't know if that.
No,
kinda-
that helps me a lot. And just a
Okay.
quick follow-up. I mean, is remote viewing, is it in a sense a form of clairvoyance, or is that a different discipline?
Well, I mean, to me, it's semantics. I think, I'm comfortable saying that we're using our subconscious, the part that is intangible, that, the part that connects to energy and frequencies and really, I feel like remote viewing or anything psychic is all about intention. It's about intention being a kind of compass where you set an intention. Okay, I'm gonna go to this location and get information. That's my intention, and then it's like you are following through it. So because we know that there's no space, space and time, you can grab things from the past, you can grab things from the future, as long as you open up that kind of that intention channel. I don't know what to call it. I don't even know if we have an actual word for it, but um, we when we're predicting future outcomes, which is another form of remote viewing, where we actually get hired to look at stocks for people, cryptocurrency, wagering on sporting events, and things like that. The fascinating part about that method is that we're actually going into the future. We're predicting the future and we're sending information to the past, which is a cool idea. It's quantum entanglement. And and we have evidence. I have papers that we have done experiments. I have published papers of our experiments that we've done, and we are well above 50% hit rate,
Wow.
which is statistically significant.
That's a big number.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, these things are there. And again, like I said in the beginning, because we're human, because we are operating from that left brain, it can take us off course. And that's why we're not completely reliable. But there are people that are better than other people.
I
I'm
see
going to need
that-
their email address.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Especially
especially the ones that are in stocks
wagering.
and crypto. Yeah, you can send that over after the.
Sure.
I see that you offer classes in various disciplines. Does that mean that anyone can learn these types of techniques, or does it require, the air quotes here, a gift, so to speak?
Yeah, I would not. We all have subconscious.
Some level of it.
Yeah, and I think, if you're, again, like hypnosis, if you're pointing in that direction, then it's, the law of attraction is bringing you more of it. So, there's so much. I'm not even sure. I have to, I never remember this guy's name, but there is a scientist that did this incredible experiment where he loaded up a whole, like, 300 or so pictures on a computer program. And some of those pictures are provocative. And he had a bunch of college students, like, connected to, blood pressure, getting all the different brain waves, and almost like a lie detector test, so that they can record. And all their job was is to sit in front of the computer and just advance the pictures, and that's it, nothing else. And what they found, of course repeatable, what they found from that is that these people's bodies were spiking before the provocative picture. So that tells us that our bodies are like antennas. They're grabbing information before our brain even is able to decode it. Our body
Okay.
reacts to it before our brain decodes. And remote viewing, that's what's happening in remote viewing. In remote viewing, we use our bodies like antennas, and we're feeling things. And that's part of the training is learning how to decipher what these feelings are and put them in a productive way where we can help people, we can help ourselves, and as long as you keep it in that structure of being blind to the target, you can have a pretty decent session, and most people do fantastic. I really haven't had. I know people themselves are hard on themselves and they say, "Oh, I suck," but they don't. They don't really. They're just hard on them. They're expecting some big thing. But every single student, I've taught hundreds of students by now, and every single person can do it.
That's really interesting. So gives me two quick follow-ups. One, does this need to be like training? Like if you're, training to become a marathon, you go out every day and you practice, right, for the race. Is this something that needs to be maintained? Do you take your classes all the time? Is there exercises that you need to do to keep that skill set at its peak?
Yeah. Yeah, yes, definitely. You do need to practice because it's this ever evolving learning thing that we're learning how our mind works, how it communicates with us. If you imagine yourself being, like Michelle the subconscious, Michelle left brain, Michelle unconscious. It's like learning how Michelle the subconscious communicates with Michelle the left brain, and how they can find a way where they can get, clean information, and get out all the junk. And it takes time to kind of figure those things out. We also use part of the protocol is something called automatic writing, where you do a doodle. And what happens is when you're doing a doodle, it's directly from the subconscious. And what happens is the minute that you add any kind of vocabulary or you start naming things, that's when we start getting into that fuzzy area. So we really need, to learn how to kind of navigate through that balance.
Well, that's really fun. That's fascinating. So my next question, since we're talking about your classes, has anyone from law enforcement gone through your programs?
No, but it's not like I haven't asked. I've worked with them. Um,
That's kind of my question. If you're working with them and they come to you for help on maybe difficult cases, cold cases, or missing person or whatever, you'd think that at some point in time they want someone to go through the program so they can understand it better, to at least be able to, understand your process.
oh, yeah, it would be so much easier to work with them if they understood. But I don't know, I've asked several people and they don't do it. But yeah, like if you want to help me and get them to take the class, that would be great. Because it would make it so much easier for them to understand, because a lot of times I am in a situation where I have to explain things. And what happens is a lot of detectives have already an advanced perception of what already happened in the case. And, there was a case that we did, I think it was in 2010. It was a kid that was missing in 2010. We didn't do it in 2010. We may have done it in 2013 or something. And they already had in their minds an idea of what they think happened. They just couldn't prove anything. They couldn't find the body and stuff like that. And we go in knowing nothing. We don't want to know anything. And, he's assuming, again, left brain, he's assuming that the child is killed, but we don't make those assumptions, because what if someone kidnapped it? We don't know. And so we walk in like with, I don't know. And so that sometimes getting them to understand when they're already set on a belief, and then we come up with different information, it's not that easy to kind of work with them, because we're like, well, we're getting this. In this particular case, it was really interesting because one of our viewers perceived some kind of structure in the location that they were giving us. And she kept referring to it as a prison. She was describing a prison. And they're like, no, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. We don't know what you're talking about. But then one of the detectives did a background search, and they found out that there was a structure there that was built to be a prison, but wasn't a prison. It didn't end up being a prison. It was just a building. So, that kind of put him in his place a little bit,
I would
because
say.
we were, yeah.
What yeah, so how do you become involved with law enforcement? Like, if they come to you, what kind of services do you say that you can offer them, either to solve a major, criminal case or to find a missing person? I mean, how does that interaction work, and how do you go about starting a case?
Well,
Before you, hey, Michelle, before you answer, I want to add on to that real quick.
Mhm.
Or do you guys ever go the other way? Like say, hey, stuff is coming in on this, and do you reach out to law enforcement?
So, okay. So the first part of that is we do not go and look for anything. They come to us. I don't go searching for something. Usually we are called, or I work in several groups, and then also now I'm starting my own, because I have so many students and they have training and they're really good, and I get lots of emails with requests. So I'm starting my own group now, but they have to seek me out to do it. I think that's a better position to be in. And then for the second one, how remote viewing works is we don't really get, um, we don't really get information unless we're sitting down to do a session. So we don't get, I mean, some people get spontaneous information, but in the world of remote viewing, it's more proactive. It's like we set up projects and there's an intention surrounding it. But that doesn't mean that some of the viewers might get something spontaneous, and they might call me and say, oh, I was washing my dishes and I got this vision. Should we do a session on it? That's kind of how it would work. But I don't think that's happened too many times. Usually it's set up with a project in mind, the secret question in mind, and then wrapped up in intention.
Oh, that's great. I guess that's you answered part of my next question, but I want to just have you, if you don't mind, really lay it out for us. So would you talk about how you would handle a missing persons case? And then let's say you're approached by law enforcement, how does it work? What information do you want? And then what information do you not want?
So it's pretty simple. I don't want any information.
Okay.
And then I'm going to also say there's an exception to that. So usually what I will do is, because when you're doing true crime or missing person, that could be emotionally draining on viewers. So I do give them a heads up that this is a true crime case. And I won't tell them any more than that. The exception is if it's a cold case, we can totally do it like that. If it's an emergency case and time is really important, then we don't want our viewers to get information that the cops or detectives already have. So to make it easier, we do give them what we call front loading, and we would say very little, like it's a male in the Portland area. We might say,
This is what law enforcement would give you.
well, they would like if I am the manager and I'm not viewing, I can hear all the information.
Oh, okay.
Even so, I don't want to hear too much because I don't want my viewers to kind of read my mind. So I'm also limited. I just need to know enough to set up the project. And then afterwards, we do a feedback session where they tell us everything. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way you discuss filtering the information. In other words, as the manager, you may know a lot, but you only tell your readers a part of it. Again, very similar to forensic science and trying to eliminate the bias. If I'm working a DNA case, do I need to know whether or not the defendant confessed? It's irrelevant. So
Right.
I like the idea of like, some people would call that like a sequential unmasking of information, so that only the relevant information goes into the raw data, and then the product you get is much better. So I found that fascinating. Now, you had talked a little bit about a case that you worked on, but could you give us a couple other war stories that either you worked or that you've heard about where, your field made a huge difference in a case?
Yeah. So I did work on a missing persons case. And that's all they said, missing person. And so I didn't know if it was male or female. I didn't know even where in the world it was, nothing. And the first thing when I put my pen on the paper, I just knew that this person was not alive. I just knew it. So I knew that my session was about somebody that didn't make it. So some of the highlights of that session were that I used this method called triangulation, where I tried to find 3 landmarks, and so I kind of drew sketches of them. So we sketch also, by the way. So we write our perceptions, but sometimes we feel like we need to sketch. So I drew an X in the center, and then I felt around like my paper to figure out what is really important in the area. And I found 3 things. One was a dilapidated building or structure. I felt like it was a foresty area. There was a body of water, and there was a big, huge boulder. And so what happens when you do that is the detectives, they know where this place is. So when they see these 3 things or what I'm describing, they just take that and they look on their map. Where can we find, something that has a body of water, dilapidated building, it's in the forest, there's a big, huge rock, and they kind of match it up. And so what they were able to do is that. So what they found was it was a male college student. That was, this dilapidated building was actually a bar, and he got drunk, walked down a path through a wooded area where there was a body of water. He took out a boat and it capsized and hit him. He died of a head injury. So, and of course, I did see this subject from a bird's eye view, and I did see blood on his forehead, but I thought it had something to do with the boulder. So in my mind, I guess my left brain came in, think it was a boulder and not a boat. So sometimes you get that overlay or misinformation, but I think it was enough to help them locate where this kid was. So that was a very, very successful session. It was very helpful. The things I got were really helpful for them. So
It's really riveting. I mean, I was like really find that really, really fascinating.
Real quick before your next question, Dion, you talked about an overlay, and is that an AOL? I've heard you talk about it, like an analytic overlay.
That overlay is something different, but yes, an analytical overlay is when you name something. So when I was referring to an overlay just now, I just meant that I got confused with the rock and the boat. So it was kind of like I see it as I just kind of blurred the two together. So it's kind of like maybe a bleed through or maybe an overlay. But analytical overlay is like if you call something an apple or a banana or you name something.
Okay, I see.
So we call that an AOL. That's when you draw a conclusion or make an assumption about something.
Before my next big question, and I'm just curious, have you ever heard of a remote viewer private investigator? Do those exist? Like someone who uses their skills specifically for like private investigation for families?
I think there is a team. I can't remember the name of the company, but a friend of mine started a company and she did get her certificate or license to be a private investigator. So she does have a company she started. I haven't kept up with her. Her name is Gail Husick, and she was running a company doing things like that. So they were taking on cases. So yes, there is something out there. To my
And
knowledge.
then, Michelle, how has the government used remote viewing in the past, and how might they be using it today if they are? Or if
Well,
they
I
might?
can say I worked on on Homeland Security. I worked on a case where it was the year before the 2020 Olympics. And so of course, I didn't know I was working with Homeland Security. They kept that from me. And of course, I didn't know the question. It was the person that was running the project just said, "Hey, Michelle, I have a target for you." So he emailed me a target number and said, "Get this done in a week." That's all I knew. Did a session, and I was getting information that felt like um, some kind of disaster. I wasn't sure if it was some kind of explosion or it was a weather related thing, but it was a land and water interface, a location. And then my session kind of pivoted to a kind of it was describing what I would say is a computer virus. And so I turned in my session and literally forgot about it. But they said you were looking at the 2020 Olympics. And we wanted to know the top threats for the Olympics. And so obviously there's no feedback because they didn't happen yet. But in 2021, yeah, I think it was 2021. I was in my kitchen doing the dishes and I was thinking about that session and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that session." And I all of a sudden realized, wait a minute, one of the top threats and why the Olympics didn't happen in 2020 was not a computer virus. It was a different kind of virus. It was a coronavirus. So
Ah,
it's a perfect example of how the left brain, at that time in 2019, it was the furthest thing from my mind that a virus would, of course I would think computer virus,
right, for sure.
brain hijacked that thought and said, of course it's a computer virus. But there was my subconscious fighting and screaming and going, no, it's a virus, just a virus. So so that's a challenge. And that's a perfect example of the
Yeah,
challenge.
that's a really good example.
Well, do you think the government's using it now? Remote viewing.
Oh gosh, yeah. So they declassified in the 90s. And that's when a lot of these ex-military guys started teaching controlled remote viewing to a lot of people. And the method I teach came from a civilian method, which I like way more than the other methods. I just they're all good, but this one resonated with me the most. And I always ask, like some of those ex-military guys, what do you think? What do you think? And in fact, the thing is, we could probably remote view to see if they're doing it still.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Makes sense.
Good twist.
right? Yeah, we could do any. We
I
could.
see you.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that they're doing something. They may have moved on to bigger and better things. My intuition feels like they're using technology a lot to boost up what we have. That's my guess. Like, I'm making that
That's
up.
that's probably a good assumption.
Yeah, I'm thinking that because they have some technologies, like there's a product called the Muse, which helps with meditation. It's something you put on your forehead and it helps you. There's Dr. Pershing, he passed now, but he made something called the God helmet, which some people believe, some people don't. But it looks like technology is making its way, with our apps and algorithms and
Sure,
all.
yeah.
I'm sure that they have to be working on some kind of way to I know it sounds like sci-fi, but that's what I think. That's my guess.
Well, Michelle, like you said, it seems like law enforcement uses, remote viewing and things like that as a last resort rather than a first resort. What do you think it's going to take to change that dynamic and that thinking?
I think that a lot of people that are doing this work have a fear of being ridiculed.
Yeah.
And I think if more people would stand up, that's what I really want to teach everybody remote viewing. I wish if money wasn't, I keep my prices as low as possible, but if I was independently wealthy, I would just be teaching it. And because I think it's so important. And I
Mhm.
think that the more brave we get and we start showing our results, because now we have, things can be time stamped, we can prove it, all that stuff. We're also the papers the experiments that we worked on. There's a lot of scientific companies that are working on these things behind the scenes. And just as their papers come out, getting regular scientists involved in what's happening. One of the things that are trending right now is like near-death experiences. And a lot of mainstream scientists are taking a note of what research they're coming up with NDEs. So I think it's going to take one of these fringy things to just take root, and slowly more and more people will be open to the possibilities of these happening. And just being honest and explaining why it's not foolproof, which I explained at the beginning of our talk, is just we're human, and part of being human is why we're not perfect. And it's just
Right.
going to take time and evolution for us to realize how important our mind is. And notice how I don't say brain, it's mind. It's not it's not the material, it's the part that isn't the material, the conscious, that, etherical kind of part of it.
Michelle, I'm shifting gears just a little bit. Tell us some of the about some of the projects you're involved with, and perhaps like what you mentioned, some of them, your ultimate goal is. Like you just mentioned, possibly, making them for free and teaching everybody. But what's the, if you had a magic wand, so to speak, what would be your big goal, your ultimate goal?
Well, I mean, there's quite a few. It's, getting answers to big questions, because this is a really, keeping it productive and not, we do fun stuff like, oh, are there aliens? Is there a Bigfoot? Those are a lot of fun, but you really don't have concrete, um, feedback or evidence to what you have. But it is fun to do those things and to kind of fantasize about it. But how it can be used in, cases like, I'm not against using it to gain wealth. As long as people don't take advantage of anything, as long as they're not using it for a bad thing. I think it's really cool that people can use this process and actually make money doing it. And just like anything, it could be used in a bad way. Helping find missing people, helping human trafficking, locating that. The war that's going on now, somebody called and asked, hey, can we remote view some stuff there? and then personal stuff. People have targeted, they gave me a target once that said, what foods should Michelle stay away from? That was a secret question. I didn't know that that's what they were doing. And that was that productive. Or if people believe in a past life, go to a past life and bring back a skill from that life and use it in this life. It's just endless, all the things that you can do. And self growth, learning that we are, as humans, we are so much more capable than we know, and that if we keep pushing this further and further, just more things are going to happen. More, we're just scratching the surface to our abilities.
Well, Michelle, thank you for a fascinating and mind-opening conversation today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I am like obsessed with this stuff. So
It comes through, definitely.
Yeah,
well,
definitely your passion comes through.
Yeah. Well, good luck with all your work. And, Michelle, we hope that you'll speak to us again sometime in the near future.
Of course, I would love it.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Dion, you had a great question about whether there are, on a rare occasion it happens. But in all seriousness, you're asking about, are there any private investigators who are remote viewers? Because that seems to make a lot of sense. And Michelle dropped the name Gail Husick. Well, I looked her up. Check out her background. JD, Harvard Law firm partner, and licensed PI. I mean, this is not the stereotypical type of background that, some might think of people who are involved in remote viewing.
No, this is someone who takes it very, very serious with that CV, right?
Absolutely.
Michelle did a really good job of dispelling the myths and stereotypes about what she does. And what a great example that she used of how advertisers hypnotize us constantly.
Proof of hypnosis right there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like if it doesn't work, they wouldn't be using it, right?
How about Instagram, man? Talk about hypnosis. I mean, I fall under it all the time. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I mean, that's the definition of a rabbit hole, is how they hypnotize you and get you locked into this. But like she said, they're using hypnosis, so there must be uses that can benefit society, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Obviously we see it with the stop smoking and this kind of stuff, but what about criminal investigation? And who knows what it could do? But, I was struck a few times about the similarity of how she conducts her work and some of the issues, and one of the current hot topics in forensic science. So people are becoming a lot more aware in my field of cognitive bias. And a lot of forensic science practitioners get extremely offended by that. And they say, I'm not biased. I'm a scientist. I don't work for the law enforcement, whoop-de-whoop. But cognitive bias refers to something that we can't be aware of. The fact that our mind just processes information in a certain way based on past experience and any number of things. And we're not even aware it's happening. So our mind is not a camera for information. There's some processing. And I think Michelle explained this very well with the left brain, the right brain, the subconscious. And then, how do you mitigate this? And she was talking about when she's managing remote viewers, she obviously has to have some information about what the target is and what they're trying to do.
Right.
But then she filters it out and gives it to her viewers so that they don't have any bias. She kind of talked about, well, maybe they're feeling that there's a red object, that it's round. And you're supposed to you don't conclude that it's a tomato. You just say, I've got a red round object, because otherwise you're introducing some bias. And I was thinking about in forensic science, how there's a movement that should we filter information to the analysts? Because there's a lot of extraneous information that really has no bearing on the DNA testing. So for example, let's say a case is submitted to a crime lab and they say, oh, by the way, the suspect confessed. Well, if an analyst is doing some kind of work, some kind of comparison, and maybe it looks like a little inconclusive, which way do you think they're going to swing potentially if they hear that the suspect confessed? That could be a real problem. Likewise, let's say as a defense expert, I get the case and the attorney says, hey, I want you to look at this, but by the way, the client confessed. Am I going to look at it as hard, or am I just going to say, I'll probably take their word for it? So great parallel with forensics. And I think Michelle shows how there is a scientific approach to what she does.
I thought it was really amazing where you brought that out in the discussion with her, and I thought it was really on point. A lot of the parallels, and then to the bias, especially as I get older, I think it's just impossible. There is not a situation where your experiences, your environment plays a part in your decision making. So I think for remote viewing as well as what you do, I think the less you know, the better going in. Just let the facts be what they are.
Yeah, I say that whether or not you believe in time travel or quantum manipulation or past lives or all of that, there's no doubt that Michelle made a convincing case here that we can all benefit from learning how our mind works. And there's no question that her techniques have accomplished some incredible things. And Dion, you think about it, there's so few people doing this type of work. And Michelle explains that you don't necessarily need to have a gift. You can learn this, you can practice it. In fact, it's a discipline like martial arts. You got to keep working on your game. So
Sorry to interrupt, but I thought that was really amazing because you would think all of us, like just the average Joe, or would think that you're something you're born with. But when she came and said, no, this could be a learned skill, I thought that was pretty amazing.
Well, what do they say? Hard work always beats talent any day of the week. So maybe it's the same analogy here. But so how many people are out there who could be stars at doing this and aren't doing it? So we haven't tapped into the full talent pool, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It was interesting how she said the government has used this in the past. And I think of, the Stargate experiment that I know something about, Dion.
Right. Yeah. It's first of all, I think that there's some people that could be a little bit predisposed to being, better at this than maybe most people. That's one. And then two, the CIA has been, tinkering around with this. I think late 60s and into the early 70s when they were playing with hallucinogenics. And they actually had a program around this where there was one guy, I wish I could remember his name, that was really, really talented, that they kind of built this program around. But if you want to kind of see like a dark comedy and to look of how this kind of works, is go check out The Men Who Stared at Goats with
that's right. Yeah.
George Clooney. It's kind of a fun way to look at this. But I know that the program supposedly went dark, and then I heard it had popped up, and I'm just wondering if they moved it off the books but are still pursuing it to this day. I wouldn't be surprised, which once again gives it validation that, hey, this stuff could work. And I guarantee you, if they solve a couple of high profile cases out there that hits kind of the national zeitgeist, every law enforcement will use this. Why wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, there will be a shift, like Michelle was saying, rather than coming to them as a last resort, maybe they come as a first resort. Once they show some validation, and some results. There's no doubt you got to get creative in law enforcement, especially when you hit a brick wall, but
or you have limited resources. So this could help cut down the investigation time by just being more efficient in your investigation starting place, correct?
Amen. So I was going to make the parallel to DNA. Like if you can get the DNA test right away, you may solve the damn case or have a great investigative lead. And so, yes, DNA testing is expensive, but what is it saving you in man hours and investigation and all of that? So maybe there's a parallel here. So I'm sure you want to learn more about Michelle. Check out her website, butterflyeffectcenter.com, and you can learn about her services, the classes that she teaches. Maybe you can take a class, projects she's working on, and even research papers she's been involved with. And of course, you can get all our episodes on crimeredefined.com. Please follow us on Instagram. Watch this, Dion. I'm going to get it right. X, not Twitter. And Facebook. And please don't forget, we are running a GoFundMe campaign to help find Terrence Woods. And what we're doing is we want to fund the proper experts to get this done. Boots on the ground for the first time. So we want to hire legal, forensic, and investigative experts. Our campaign is entitled Investigating the Disappearance of Terrence Woods. And all of our social media handles and website have links to this GoFundMe.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most comprehensive information about his case, all on GoFundMe. Everything you want to know about the case is there. So even if you can't donate, read up on it, and just, if you see our post, just retweet it. That will help. Just help us spread the word.
Good point. And obviously, this is a case near and dear to our heart. We've covered it extensively on Crime Redefined. And you'll see on the GoFundMe that Terrence Woods Sr. actually is gave a testimonial video. So, as Dion said, help us any which way you can. So thank you for your support, and everybody be well.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.